spend in a miserable way.
U.S. News. Mitch McConnell privately cautioned Trump about emergency declaration on border wall. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Kentucky, listens as President Donald Trump speaks during a meeting with Republican congressional leadership at the White House in September. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Kentucky, listens as President Donald Trump speaks during a meeting with Republican congressional leadership at the White House in September. Majority Leader cautioned President privately this week about the consequences of declaring a national emergency to build his border wall, telling him the move could trigger political blowback and divide the, according to two Republicans with knowledge of the exchange. McConnell, Kentucky, told Trump that might end up passing a resolution disapproving the emergency declaration, the people said, which would force the president to contemplate issuing his first veto ever, in face of opposition from his own party. McConnell delivered the message during a face-to-face meeting with the president Tuesday at the, according to the Republicans, who requested anonymity to describe the encounter. The two men met. The majority leader's comments to the president came amid rising GOP concerns over the fallout if Trump were to declare a national emergency that would allow him to circumvent Congress and use the military to build new walls along the. Trump sees the possibility of making a definitive statement on the topic during his, telling reporters to watch the Tuesday speech closely. I think he'll find, and Trump again dismissed chances that he'll get the $5.7 billion in wall funding he wants from a bipartisan congressional committee charged with producing a border security solution that could forestall another government shutdown. The committee is working. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi declared Thursday that there will be between the political middle and his own base, which has embraced his demand for a border wall. While Republicans facing a deadline for a compromise, House Republicans on the conference committee plan to travel to the border Sunday and Monday. The Oval Office discussion over a national emergency declaration illustrated the dynamic that has developed between Trump and McConnell. The two speak free, but even as they have kept in touch privately, in public their strategies have diverged. Although McConnell has, I think some of their goals are aligned, but the methods to get there might be different, said senior RALA. The Washington Post's Josh Dorsey, Damian Palliser, Scott Clements and John Wagner contributed to this report. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell cautioned President Donald Trump privately this week about the consequences of declaring a national emergency to build his border wall, telling him the move could trigger political blowback and divide the GOP, according to two Republicans with knowledge of.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.